Okay, I'll go ahead and get started again. Thanks for joining the first Circle of Success. We're going to talk about custom data sets. If you have any questions or anything through this, please raise your hand and go to webinar panels and we'll unmute you. Or if you don't want to do that, you can just use the questions panel to type in anything that you want. So what we're going to talk about today is custom data sets. How do we make them? Why do you use them? What good are they? And how they might augment your experience with maintaining Salesforce, running projects, starting development. Along with that, we'll have a customer story from Splunk. So we have Ross from Splunk on the line. He's the other lovely person with his camera on. He'll be providing some commentary and just giving his story of using Proudly. And then we want to have the last 5 or 10 minutes available for just questions and answers around what you can do with Proudly and what you might be interested in and how we can make all your dreams come true there. So with that, we'll go ahead and get started. The first thing you want to know about custom data sets is that they are typically used to do any of these following things. You'll maybe seed data into sandboxes, dev orgs, scratch orgs, get data out of a sandbox that might be held hostage from refreshes or something like that, where it's very common that I hear, oh, we haven't refreshed the sandbox in a year because there's some important information in there and we don't know how to deal with that right now. Or the main distinguisher of the Proudly tools that will promote data from sandboxes to production, sort of like a change set for data. And you can do this with like any of the objects that exist inside of Salesforce to say, hey, I want to extract all the accounts with opportunities, contacts, contracts, opportunity contact roles, whatever you really want to get out. So if you're getting some type of one-off request from a developer or an admin saying they need some data for testing, or if you're working with managed packages like Field Service Lightning or CPQ and you need to do a big update to what is essentially the configuration of your experience and how that product works, you can promote to production or send that to a sandbox or scratch org to start some type of development work that you need to do. So I want to give a quick demo here. Let's see if I can manage my sharing appropriately. So you should now be seeing just a general Salesforce developer org. And I'm going to go in and just build a data set and show you how kind of quick and easy it is. So if I go to Datasets Home, I should be able to see all of the data sets that have been created. So some of these are from templates that we have. So all of these SBQQ ones are from the CPQ package. I've already made one for CPQ quotes, for AppOps test cases, but I'm gonna make a new one because say I have, someone that's working on some new Service Cloud work and they need some accounts with cases and case comments and contacts sent over into an org to maybe test a trigger or test a workflow rule or process builders or anything else that they might be trying to do in an org. So just go ahead and click New. And I'll call this accounts with so just name it whatever, and I'll go to my deployment object. So I'm going to start with an account. because that's kind of the starting point of everything. And when I've set my deployment object as an account, I can then see that I have all the parent relationships to that account and all the child relationships. So it's really quick to go ahead and add in these other objects. So I said that I wanted contacts. I said that I wanted cases. And I can quickly add anything else in here that I want. Not really finding anything else of super interest. So then I can actually go another level deeper and go into case. And I know that I wanted case comments, and that's a child, so I can go and select the case comment. And I probably want this case contact role too, to make sure that I know who is who as I'm importing contacts from the account as well. And I might want case team members if those exist. So right now I've spent maybe 2 minutes, and I think most of that was just waiting for the datasets home tab to load. And I've saved this data set. And I can see that it now includes all these objects, and it's going to preserve their relationships. So I'm imagining that a lot of people in this call have used Proudly templates before, where you have a deployment plan and you just click deploy and it moves all of your FSL data or all your CPQ data. This is how those templates are made. It's just a really quick, easy point and click setup to get things up and running. And it will preserve all this information. So if that's the goal that I needed, I can also go back to the parent here and say, I just want to send over a few records for, my developer or something. So I can go to record selection criteria, and I could put in a query where I could say like account name contains test or something like that. Or I can just use the record selection limit to send over a few records. So I'll just say I want to limit it to 10 records. There's a lot of other fields and things here that do specific things. You can do a lot of things even just at the field level if there's things that need to behave a specific way. There's some more advanced functions here with event control, which might be useful if you're moving things like accounts or cases that might have a lot of automation on that. So I'll show you that really quick. So you can pick a schema org, which is where you just want to think of this as where your data is coming from. So I'll pick Jody's test org, and the destination org of, I'll move into this org that I'm using, this atomic control org. So when I select this, it will allow me to toggle into event control, where I can then deactivate or manage any platform events on specific objects. So as you know, Proudly is basically a data loader. It will do updates and inserts of records, which can trigger platform events on specific objects. So with event control, you can go in and say, I want to see what trigger events are on account. And I can pick and choose things that I may need to deactivate from here. Or if I need to check to see if there's like a workflow rule that I might need to deactivate. Nope, there's none in this org. But it does give you ability to find anything that may be firing on that record event. And what it will do is it will use metadata API to turn off this platform event while the data load is running. And then when the data load is complete, it will turn it back on. So it's a really useful feature for using these custom data sets, where a lot of times orgs will have a lot of different events and automation on objects like account or opportunity or case when you're moving those over. So I'll go ahead and deploy. Where of course I pick a source org, and I pick a destination org, and I click deploy. So that's about it. That's all the time it takes to set up some type of custom data set. So when some developer or other admin on your team is, has a request for, oh, can you please just push some data really quick into an org? You can respond and basically be done with that in 10, 15 minutes a lot of times. So are there any questions around this? Anything anyone else wants to see? If that's possible, you can raise your hand, or we can continue on with Ross's experience. Hello, JPal. Looks like you raised your hand. I unmuted you. You can, I think you'll have to like unmute your own microphone or whatever.
Yeah, sure.
Hey, there you are.
Can you hear me?
Yep, I can hear you.
Okay, so I have a question on that event control where you mentioned we can turn off the trigger or we can turn off the workflow rule, and you have a metadata API call happening when this data load is running, right?
Yeah.
So is that happening for the running user only, or the workflow will be turned off across the board? So let's say if the data load is running for 10 minutes and we have turned off that while the workflow rule, is it just for me who is doing the transaction, or it is turned off across the board and there is nothing happening in the org if the workflow is off?
It should just be for the transaction itself.
Mm-hmm.
So it shouldn't impact the entire org.
So maybe I did not ask the question clearly. So my point is, if the transaction is running for 10 minutes and I turned off the validation, the workflow rule, meaning the workflow rule is inactive from the metadata level. And if there are 10 users in the system trying to do a similar thing, the workflow rule is not going to fire for other 10 folks as well during those 10 minutes.
It could vary on the type of action that you are turning off. So for like triggers and things like that, those can be turned off inside of the specific transaction itself. I'm not specifically sure how that transacts with something like a workflow rule, but we do have documentation around that in our integration guide. So along with, kind of creating your own data sets, we do have templates available that you can download to achieve some of these things. So like a starting point for Sales Cloud seeding inside of our customer support portal at success.proudly.co. And we also have full documentation to get into the specifics of what would be going on with event control and how those would vary across process builders and triggers and things like that. So it can vary from object type.
Okay, thank you.
Yep. Anyone else have any questions? Anything they want to see? Okay, we'll move along and can go back to, oh yeah, I switch it from the sharing piece. Go back to the presentation. So I'd like to introduce Ross from Splunk, who's been on here. Ross has been using probably for quite a while and has done a lot of things with Splunk to kind of build out all their data sets. Something that Ross was mentioning earlier was that he doesn't really use our templates. They've just built out everything that they need. So Ross, do you want to say hello and give a quick intro?
Yep. Hi guys, Ross at Splunk. I have been using this product for something like 4 years now, so I've kind of seen all the ins and outs of using it. And as I was telling Derek, I've always used custom templates, to do specifically whatever we needed, essentially. So yeah, I mean, it's pretty powerful, but you do have to invest the time to actually, think about what you want to migrate, how you want to migrate it, what your release strategy is, and then based on that, actually go about developing your data sets that you're going to use. I can keep talking, by the way, but let me know when to stop. So that's the summary.
That's fine. So I mean, like, what did you do before you used Prodly to kind of manage data and all of those types of things?
Yeah, I think my first two projects, we did it just using data loader and CSV files, which was not fun, as you can imagine, for anyone that's ever tried to do it with CPQ specifically, which is the context I've always used it in. So CPQ just has this, web of reference data, right, with all these relationships between objects. So it's pretty challenging to go and do it just using conventional means. So this has been a huge help having this available.
Cool. And what would you say like your favorite feature or use cases for the product?
Well, I mean, I think the main benefit is just what I described is, the fact that it manages these data hierarchies and the interrelationships and, syncing objects in the correct order, with all the lookup relationships and stuff like that. So, I mean, that's the main thing. As far as specific features, there's some nice things. I mean, you have a bit of a metadata sync with like pick list values and missing fields and stuff like that. So it does have some metadata migration components, which are handy. There are also some CPQ idiosyncrasies with migrating certain objects where you have to migrate them in like a specific state and then like change the status. Like with product and price rules, you can't migrate like custom logic settings. You have to like change the status to like all conditions, and then you have to flip it back normally, but Prodly does it for you. So things like that are really helpful.
Okay, great. And what are some things that you're looking forward to from Prodly and AppOps as we help you manage different environments?
You mean in the future, like future release functionality? Well, 1 version control, 2 version control, and 3 version control. We have, yeah, at our company, we've got like 4 different CPQ development tracks going in parallel, and we're all working on shared overlapping components, and we're doing staggered releases all over the place. So we've got these 4 different work streams, and keeping things in sync and migrating only what we want to migrate is a big hassle today. So there's just a lot of manual processes around validating what's being migrated, and doing like file diffs and stuff like that, and running queries before we do migrations. So having version control for data would be immensely helpful in streamlining that process. So that's what I'm most looking forward to.
Okay, great. And of course, we are starting a beta program for version control. If anyone is using GitHub, we'll allow you to connect to that, which will allow you to push data to a repository first and do some of that validation and diffs and things like that that Ross was talking about inside of a repository instead of across orgs. And you can kind of see what's happening as you insert that data. And then you can push from the repository to any org that you are interested in. Got a question from the audience. It says, aside from CPQ, what other pains does Prodly solve? I think Splunk is mostly using this for CPQ, but you do have some other things that you're maybe looking at.
I mean, for us and for me personally, it's always been in the context of CPQ, just given that it is driven primarily by reference data, which is a bit unique, and it's very hierarchical reference data. So for me personally, that's been the main benefit. Although, I mean, you can use Prodly for anything on the Salesforce platform.
Okay. And are there any other questions from the audience? Anyone want to ask Ross anything? Looks like Rohit has a question. Go ahead and unmute Rohit. Hello.
So that was a nice session. So I have one query. I mean, suppose there's already a client using a Aptus CPQ, and they are migrating their whole system to a let's say Salesforce CPQ.
Okay.
So is there any pre-guidelines that you would suggest, or are there any such guidelines supported from your product, like when you are migrating the data from the Aptus CPQ into the Salesforce CPQ? Or
yeah, that's a great question. So I have worked on a few dozen projects where we would migrate from Aptus CPQ to Salesforce CPQ. That was in my previous life where I was a CPQ solution architect and I worked on literally hundreds of projects. I would not recommend that you try to approach that project as a data migration or a data transformation process. It is really strongly a complete new implementation of a product. So you really want to start from the ground up with Salesforce CPQ and understand how to architect that. That said, you may, after you have done that analysis and understand how you're going to use the new product architecture, be able to migrate over data from, say, some of the pricing tables in Aptus into either custom or existing objects inside of Salesforce CPQ. And you can definitely use Prodly to manage that. You will essentially have to use Prodly to manage the CPQ build and deployments from like dev to test to production. So there's really, no loss in value in having this relational data loader tool inside of Prodly. But I would really advise against trying to do a direct map from the Aptus data model into Salesforce CPQ. I have seen a single company literally spend millions of dollars and take years to not accomplish that task because they had that mindset. You really need to just embrace the new architecture, the new product, and treat it as a completely new implementation to get the most out of that and do it most effectively.
I agree on that. But recently one of the client wanted to do that because they were shifting from Aptus CPQ to Salesforce CPQ.
Yep.
So I think it would be a good tool, the custom data sets. I think that would be ideal solution for them to go if they want to go. Yeah.
Yeah, sure. We also offer transformations, so you can take data from one object and move it into creating new records inside of a new org, and move field values from one object to another, which can be helpful in that transformation process.
Okay, good to know that.
Yep.
Thank you.
No problem. Anyone else have any questions?
If not, I was just going to second that if you're doing any sort of migration to another system, I mean, it is best to approach it as a brand new implementation and, develop a system architecture from scratch. And, from that point on, you can figure out how you do elements of data transformation. But at least in CPQ systems, I mean, usually just the data models are going to be fairly different, right? So it's very difficult to do like a straight lift and shift. You can do that stuff more on like accounting systems because the data models are very similar across all of those systems. So if you're migrating from like, I don't know, NetSuite to Intact or something, or like, SAP financials to Oracle financials, I mean, they all pretty much have the same data structure. which are relatively flat. But with CPQ systems, they're not like that at all. They're very hierarchical, and they're just going to be different. So it's much more challenging to do that.
Yeah, I would say maybe the
Yes.
only. Yeah, go ahead. Okay. Yeah, I'd say that really the only thing that works kind of between those systems, if you have like a flat pricing table,
Yeah.
that you looked up, you might want to move those over.
Yeah. Right now,
yeah.
I would say right now at Splunk, our overarching project is to migrate off of an old manufacturing CPQ called Firepoint. We're migrating that onto Salesforce CPQ, and we just started from scratch completely. And I mean, it definitely seems like that was the right thing to do.
Yep. We're going to go ahead and hit a couple other topics here. If anyone does have questions, I can stay on a little longer. Ross might have to leave, I'm not sure. So feel free to raise your hand. But the key takeaways we want you to have from today is that these are the top uses for custom data sets. You can set up orgs to begin projects. You know, there's no data in them. It's really tricky to do that. This will also allow you to maybe adopt using DX to quickly make scratch orgs. We have a DX plugin to push data from a source into those scratch orgs. So people can get started to make some small changes, test them on real data, and then promote the changes through DX. Deploying any configuration data, so like CPQ, FSL packages where the data essentially acts as code, where you're moving to low code applications. That's one of the main uses. And then other things like syncing relational data between orgs, freeing up sandboxes, or managing one-off requests for troubleshooting or sample data are kind of the main quick and easy things you can do with custom data sets. And upcoming events and topics, next month we'll have a guest from our customer Quest talking about how they use Fraudly for field service lightning. We're going to have a session around sandbox management best practice, like how to effectively set up sandboxes, use virtual external ID effectively, and get the most out of your org structure and all the supporting orgs that you're paying for. And in October, we'll be talking about our AppOps test product, which is automated regression testing for Salesforce CPQ. If there's something else you want to learn about, just let us know. And you can contact me at dblack@proudly.co or log into our customer community at success.proudly.co. So that's everything. I can hang out for a bit if anyone has questions. If not, thanks for joining. All right, it looks like there's no more questions and people are leaving, so I'm gonna go ahead and end the session. Thanks, everyone.